Welcome back to Chasing Dreams Homestead. How you doing today, dreamers? So our buddy Brett Clark runs a local Facebook swap group that's pretty large. He hosts numerous swaps in our area in southern Indiana throughout the spring, summer, and fall. And in his swap group, there have been some folks lately that have dealt with poultry diseases and sicknesses and even deaths. So Brett asked that we do a video on quarantining. You may have seen that in our previous video where we mentioned how we introduce new poultry to our flock. In the beginning of the video, I definitely speak on quarantining. We're going to go a little bit further into it today and show you different ways that we are able to quarantine. I don't know about you, but at least for me, if I hear it, that's one thing, but if I see it, it sticks with me more. So right now we've got some juvenile paint silkies in here. We absolutely love silkies. And these paint silkies right here came from Falls Creek Farm down in, or not Falls Creek, I'm sorry, Fall River Farm down in Tennessee. The lady is very sweet. She has nice quality stock, and we're trying to improve our paint silky flock. We've got numerous colors of silkies, but paints are something we're wanting to improve this year. We feel pretty confident in our other colors. So we went and got some birds from her. Well, like I said in that other video, anytime you bring new livestock on your farm or your homestead, you want to quarantine it. And I briefly touched on the different things about, even though that breeder may have healthy stock and you may have healthy stock, it's no different than when we travel and then we come back and we have some sickness or whatnot, or we have to go to the hospital. You know, a lot of times they'll ask you, hey, have you been to this foreign country within the last 14 or 21 days? Same scenario. And the reason for that is because they all know that we have immunities to the things that are in our everyday environment. Our bodies are very good at building up immunities and antibodies to these things. Now, when we go somewhere new, our bodies are now stressed from the travel, and our bodies are attacked by the different things that we may be exposed to in those areas that we have not normally been exposed to, so we don't have immunities and antibodies built up to these things. And it's the same with animals. And that's something I touched on in that video of how we introduce our poultry. We went and bought some beautiful chicks from a lady, a well-known breeder, a very clean breeder. We knew her stock was healthy, we knew her operation was healthy, and we learned the hard way. We brought them home and we put them with chicks in the same brooder that we had from our farm that were the same size. We didn't have multiple brooders at the time, and within 36 hours our chicks started dying. That was our fault. It wasn't that breeder. She didn't send us sick birds or anything like that. And like the vet explained to us, those birds had immunities to things that were on her farm. Our birds have immunities to things that are on our farm. So even though both of our stock are healthy, when we introduced the two together, her birds may have had something that ours weren't used to, and it wiped ours out. So that's why it's really important to go ahead and quarantine, because birds not only can be carriers and transmitters of diseases, but sometimes they can come sick as well, or the stress of movement will make a sickness manifest. So what we like to do, at least on Chasing Dreams Homestead, and let me say that there are multiple ways to quarantine, and I'm not saying one way is right or wrong or anything like that. I'm saying at the very least do some sort of quarantine. You'll thank yourself for it later on. You'll save yourself a lot of money, a lot of stress, a lot of heartache. Because if you end up with a sick animal that doesn't die, now you've spent a lot of time, a lot of money in trying to help that animal recover. So you've now not only invested your initial purchase price for that animal, but now all the additional time that went into trying to help that animal recover from whatever sickness it got. So you really want to be smart and be responsible about things, and when you bring a new animal home, you want to quarantine it. Now, these birds are up in our front garden, nowhere near the rest of our birds. Our primary flock, are further back in the property. If I had it my way and we had a large enough property, I would literally quarantine hundreds of yards apart. We don't have a property large enough for that, so we do what we can on our property. So I have these birds in our permanent quarantine pen. And this is where any new birds that we're going to introduce to the flock get quarantined for a minimum of 21 days, sometimes 45 days. It all depends on things we may notice while watching the birds, on if we think maybe we need to quarantine these birds a little bit longer just to make sure they're safe or not. Now, a good rule of thumb would be a 30-day minimum. Sometimes we felt pretty confident at 21 days and we went ahead and introduced birds. Now, more often than not, if I do that, that's usually a grown bird. I wouldn't necessarily do that with a very young bird. Now, a grown bird, chickens in general. Let me back up a little bit. Chickens in general are very good at hiding sickness. So if someone sold you a sick bird, they may not have known that bird was sick. Chickens are very fluffy. They've got feathers, and unless you're really handling that bird and feeling that bird and touching the breastbone area and whatnot, that bird may look full, healthy, meaty because its feathers are fluffed out. When you start feeling them and looking them over, then you'll be able to feel if their chest is not filled out, if they're lacking meat, if they're very bony. Those are signs that you may want to look further into. Is this bird healthy, or is this bird sick, malnourished? There's so many different reasons. Another thing that really attacks a bird would be the mites. And unfortunately, mites are just part of owning livestock. We learned that last year with one of our cooney pigs. And it wasn't because of a lack of quarantine. That was coming through the bedding and the hay that we bought. We found a great deal on some hay, and we brought the hay home, and coonies like to eat hay. Well, the mites were in the hay. I don't think that old timer knew that there were mites in his hay at all, so it wasn't a concern or a conflict. It's just part of owning animals. So all of those things said, being responsible, we do all we can to try to curb the amount of variables that are going to impact our animals. We quarantine in the front, away from the animals that are in the back. We don't let these guys go around those birds until they've been up here minimum 21, usually up to 45 days. At that point, we feel pretty confident that if there was any sicknesses that were going to show their ugly face, that they would have shown their face. Stress from movement causes birds to manifest their sicknesses or show that a sickness that they may have been carrying and not showing in the past. It's kind of similar to, think about if a person gets the mouth ulcers or whatnot, the cold sores. Those are usually brought on by a high stress situation. So that person can walk around 300 days out of the year, maybe even longer, 330 days out of the year, and never have a cold sore. But they get in a high stress situation, something stresses their immune system, and now that cold sore has shown up. So here we are, we're moving these birds from a different farm to our farm. So that's stressful. Those birds have left an environment that they were used to, that they had been thriving on, and they came to a new environment where there are new critters, there are new germs, there's all kinds of different things that will stress them out, as well as the travel. We keep them safe, we keep them warm, we keep them fed, we keep them clean, but we keep them away from our flock. And these are just things that we have learned along the way that have really helped us out and saved a lot of heartache. Later on in the video, I'll show you other ways that you can quarantine your animals if you don't have a permanent area like this. Now, another thing I'll say about the quarantining pen is that we will sometimes, or not sometimes, but we will, once we've taken birds out of it, we will rest it before we put new birds in it. A lot of avian type illnesses can't live but so long in the ground or in the soil or in the coop. So what we do is we'll rest it, and then we'll also clean out and disinfect this coop before the next wave of birds get quarantined in it. That's just a thing that we've started doing as a practice around Chasing Dreams Homestead, and it seems to really help because, again, the next wave of animals that we're going to quarantine, these little guys, they're healthy right now. They appear healthy, at least. They could be shedding viruses or anything into this soil, and we don't know that because they appear very healthy. Now, when we take them out, those viruses and bacteria will live in that soil for a little while until the next bird came along, or until it's been long enough that those viruses and illnesses have naturally died off on their own because they hadn't had a host. So that's why we rest it, and then we disinfect it. That's just a protocol that we do, and again, like I said, that's our way of doing things. It's not the only way of doing things, but it has definitely helped us out time after time. Last year, the Louisville area had, I think it was a 250-mile radius. People couldn't sell, buy, transfer rabbits because of RHV. And that's a really unfortunate thing for rabbits. Not many of them live very well after they contracted that. It's got a high mortality rate. But that was the state board of health coming in and saying, hey, you guys are going to have to quarantine these rabbits, keep them on your property. We're not going to move them around because we don't want to risk spreading an outbreak. Same thing with these birds. We brought them here. They came from somewhere else. We're quarantining these dudes. We're not going to move them around in case they had something. We're not going to risk spreading an outbreak. A very good friend of ours raises broiler chickens for the farmers markets. And last year they contracted MG in their flock somehow. They had to cull almost, I think they said 800 birds. They got in touch with Purdue to see what they could do. And it wasn't necessarily that the MG was wiping out their birds, but it was the secondary sickness because their birds' immune systems were weak that wiped out their birds, and MG is highly contagious. So all of these things come into play, and you don't want to get yourself in that situation where you've spent time traveling like we do, money, or just your time and attention into a flock, and then bring something and wipe your flock out, or have to cull your flock because your flock has now contracted something that they're going to have for life and that they'll be spreaders of. So it's just a good practice to get into, to think about biosecurity when you have livestock. I keep referring to the flock, but the same thing goes with your goats, your cattle, your pigs, your rabbits, everything. It's just a smart move, and it's something that you'll thank yourself for in the long run if you don't have to run into a scenario like our friend did where they had to cull, I think it was like 800 birds. That's heartbreaking, guys. You know what I mean? You sit there and you spend the time to feed these birds as chicks. You order them, you get them in, and then all of a sudden they start getting sick and you're wondering what's going on. You go to the vet or you go to Purdue or wherever, and you find out, well, your flock has now contracted something that's contagious and going to hurt them in the long run on all of their production fronts. All your hard work, it went out the window because now you have to cull them, you have to get rid of them, and that's really unfortunate. And so as a responsible animal owner, you need to try to think about the things that you can curtail on your end, and quarantining is one of the ways to do it. Now, another thing that I'll touch on in this video is having medication on hand. So from my understanding, it's either June or July of 2023. There's laws that have gone into effect that will take effect then that will make it much harder for livestock owners to get medications, especially animal antibiotics and whatnot. So if you don't already have a full cabinet and arsenal of medication to take care of your livestock, because livestock do get sick from time to time, and it happens, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's something that's contagious or a reason to cull or anything like that, but they do get sick from time to time. So as a responsible animal owner, you've quarantined. Well, you also need to have medication on hand in case things come along. We bought some bottle calves for our girls a couple years ago as a Christmas present. We were super duper excited about it. It was the first time we ever had cows, and when it was all said and done, we had gone to the vet over and over again for like 2 weeks. We put so much money into those calves to try to keep them alive, so much money into antibiotics that we got from the vet to try to keep them alive, and they died on us. One of them had pink eye and then scours, and we were new to it, so we didn't really know anything about it. The other one had pneumonia, and then that one gave the other one pneumonia. It was nasty. It was a lot of crying, a lot of heartache, and something that we may have been able to be a little more successful about if we'd have known the signs and symptoms and had the medication sooner. At first we thought it was just going to be scours, and we ran and got electrolytes and scour pills from Tractor Supply, and we started pushing that stuff, and then we noticed it was more than scours. So then we finally got into the vet, and if you've ever had livestock and you've had to deal with the vet, a lot of vets are inundated with domestic animals and don't have time to see the livestock folks very often, or they require that they come out to your farm or your homestead. So when that happens, you're at their leisure when they can fit you in their schedule, and so a lot of times it's several days before they can come. So that's why it's very important to go ahead and have antibiotics on hand and start learning about possible symptoms and illnesses that will affect the livestock you have, so that you can give your livestock the best fighting chance to survive any kind of sickness they may get. Now, I'm not a vet. I'm not giving you veterinary advice. I'm just telling you, as a homesteader, we have built up a medicine cabinet for our livestock because we've learned things that work, what to look for, signs and symptoms to pay attention to. And that's just part of the homesteading journey. Is as you gain experience, you come across a sickness and you reach out to the other homesteading members in your community or whatnot. They'll share information with you. They'll tell you, oh, that sounds like this or that, and we've used this in the past to treat it, and it's worked well for us. My wife's a member of an emergency goat Facebook page because we've had goats in the past that have had issues, and it was no fault of our own. They've lived here healthily and happily for a while, and just something got them sick. So it's just a good practice after you've started your quarantining. You need to go ahead and start figuring out different illnesses that are going to affect your animals and start trying to get some medication while you can, because again, the vet may not be able to come out for a while, and if you want that animal to have the best fighting chance it can, you need to be able to do your job on your end as the animal owner and recognize things that are going on with your animal. And that's the same reason why we handle our animals daily, unless we're on vacation, and then we have a farm sitter come. But we're always out there. We do like the efficiency of auto feeders and waterers and whatnot, but we still make laps and we check on everything. It's just part of it. But I think that's, about as far as I can go on this quarantine video for y'all. I hope it's been helpful. If you have any other questions, or if there's something I haven't thought of, feel free to reach out to us. We're on Facebook, Tracing Dreams Homestead on Facebook. We've also got the YouTube going, as you can tell from this video. And we've also got our TikTok fired up and starting to do the Instagram. We appreciate the opportunity to do this for Brett's group, and we hope that this helps save some of you the heartache that we've experienced running into the journey of homesteading along with livestock. Always, always, always research, folks. Do your research. And later on into the video, like I said, I'll show you a few other options for the quarantining. But we've all been there. We've all got excited and jumped headfirst into something that we weren't fully ready for. So hopefully this video will give you a little bit of a pause and let you think of, okay, well, at least I need to get a few things ready before I do that jump. All right, y'all, so this is another option that you can use for a quick, simple quarantine pen. This is up in our garden in the front. I don't have any birds in here at the moment because I'm not overloaded with birds I need to quarantine. We don't bring in new birds very often at all to our flock. But we've all been in that scenario where you get yourself in a pinch, an opportunity presents itself, and you need a place to safely quarantine the birds and you weren't ready, or your existing permanent quarantine pen is occupied. So something like this, the XXL dog crates, works great. Now in fair weather, this is plenty. If it gets bad, you can always drape tarps over it or whatnot. It's just one more idea for you. It's an old rabbit hutch that also doubles as a way to quarantine these two birds. One of these birds came from our friend over in New Salisbury, and the other one is a hen from a very well-known breeder up in Cincinnati. But we wanted to make sure that these birds were quarantined before we introduced them to our flock. So, since our primary quarantine pen is full, these birds have been in this rabbit hutch, which again also doubles as another way to keep our birds quarantined. This hutch is over in our garden. In the springtime, we run rabbits in this hutch so that they can drop fresh manure to go around our garden as a fertilizer. All right, y'all. So when I was filming this video yesterday, something kept hitting in the back of my head. I'm forgetting to tell you something. Thankfully, I sent the video to my buddy Rodo and said, hey brother, will you check this out and let me know if you have any thoughts or anything that I may have missed. And he instantly was like, you forgot to tell them that you guys change your clothes when you go to pens, and about that aspect of the quarantining and the biosecurity. I knew it. I told y'all, I'm getting older, I'm getting forgetful. I knew it. And to be completely honest with you, I spitballed the entire video. I had no notes. I was just speaking off of, my memory and the things that I knew about quarantining. So, the part that I forgot to mention is our permanent quarantine pen is in the front. Only one person tends to that pen. They don't go tend to that pen and then go tend to the other animals or birds or whatnot. So that's something we generally give to one of the kids as a chore. So if there's a quarantine pen, one kid only goes and does that. Then they come in and get ready for school or whatnot. So they're not tracking contaminants from that pen to other pens. Now, if we were going to go from that pen to another pen, I would highly recommend that you change your clothes and you change your shoes. Because, again, they may bring germs or some kind of disease to your homestead or farm that you're unaware of. And then now you've gotten those on your clothing and have tracked them elsewhere. What my buddy had explained to me, the buddy that had to deal with that MG, was that the MG is spread through their dander, the dust that they create. So in that scenario, that's more of a situation where they're now spreading it as dust that is accumulated on your clothing, and now you're going into other pens or other buildings, depending on how your setup is, and the dust is potentially falling off of your clothing. Now, I know like coccidia would be spread through the fecal matter and the blood in the fecal matter, so that's something you could very easily spread on your shoes if you were to pick that up while you were dealing with a pen and then go to another pen. So these are all things to keep in mind when you're doing your biosecurity program and you're doing a successful quarantine. Make sure you're not tracking contaminants from one area to another area. All right, y'all, I'm getting older. I'm forgetful. If I missed anything, feel free to comment or message us and let us know. If you have any other tips about quarantining, go ahead, let us know. We appreciate it. We love to share knowledge, but we also love to learn. If you like what we're doing, go ahead and check us out on Facebook, Chasing Dreams Homestead. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Homesteading is a journey that we love to share with other homesteaders, and we love to learn from other homesteaders along their journeys. Until next time, y'all, keep dreaming.